Hey everyone, how's it going? Coming to y'all with another episode of my inexpensive knife series. This one's on a knife I can almost guarantee you've never seen. Unless you're a hardcore Amazon shopper. This is the Hurricane G10 folder. Now I wish they had a model number or something other than just the brand name to go off of, but that's what they call it, the Hurricane G10 folder. And essentially this is a very inexpensive folding everyday carry slash rescue knife, meaning a knife to leave in your glove box in case of emergency, for about $15 or less. Alright, whenever I saw this, I thought it was kind of interesting because it combined the Extrema Ratio style handle with that DPX Hest style notch in the blade. And I thought it was kind of neat. I've never owned either brand before, and I really wanted to try it out, see how they performed. And this kind of gave me the handle style of the Extrema Ratio, and let me try out that little notch to see how useful it was. So, yeah, let's go ahead and jump into the video. First of all, showing you the packaging like I always do if I have it. Comes in a fairly simple black box. On the side you can see the three colors it's available in. I got the OD green. They also make it in an orange, which would be your best bet for a rescue type knife because it'd be easier to see. And then an all black if you wanted to use it as a self-defense knife, which I think it could function pretty well in. And on the bottom we have our barcode and then a funny little warning label. Warning, this product can expose you to chemicals including DEHP, which is known in the state of California to cause cancer and birth defects and other reproductive harm. For more information, please go to www.p65warnings.ca.gov. So that's kind of fun. Apparently this exposes you to chemicals which can cause cancer and birth defects. I don't know if it's the fiberglass and the G10 they're talking about, more than likely. Not a big deal. And inside we see that it is a foam insert which actually holds the knife. Okay, so it comes in a very nice presentation. Pretty decent little box. I actually think it's fairly classy for the price point of the knife. Again, $15 or less. But let's jump into what people actually care about, which is the knife itself. And again, I have the OD green G10 handle version. They make it in the orange and the black. I went with OD green because, for one, I don't see the color all that often on G10, and for two, it kind of took me back to, 7 years ago when Smith & Wesson knives was using OD green G10 on their Extreme Ops knives and their Homeland Security knives and so on. Alright, and this actually reminds me very much of the G10 on those knives. Reasonably thick, moderate texture, somewhat squared off in the hand, but overall reasonably comfortable for what it is. Probably the same exact provider that Smith & Wesson was using for their G10. But if you're looking to use this as a self-defense knife, maybe the black is the way to go. If you're looking to use this as a rescue knife to put in your car, I'd go with the orange personally. But let's start with the blade, shall we? We have a 3.5-inch blade made of 8CR15 MOV. That's right, not 13, not 14, but 15. Performance is, in my experience with this knife, pretty much the same as an 8CR13 or 14 MOV steel. Alright, I didn't notice that it performed any better or any worse than Kershaw's 8CR13, Bird's 8CR13, or CRKT's 8CR14 MOV steels. Performs about the same. Looking on zknives.com, they say that it's about the same as a AUS 8A. So I guess in theory it's a small step above 8CR13 and 14, as they're the Chinese equivalent of standard AUS 8, but honestly you won't notice the difference. It is a drop point design, according to them, which you could argue that could be a drop point or a clip point, or hell, you could possibly argue it's a spear point. All I know is it's a functional blade shape with a reasonably precise tip, which makes opening up clamshell packaging and, packages from the mail an absolute breeze. Alright, like I mentioned, 3.5 inches long, 8CR15. We do have a black coating. If I had to guess what that is, I'd just say it's a Teflon. It hasn't worn off in my use with it yet, and I have done some cardboard cutting with it, but not all Teflon finishes rub off like the one on the K-Bar Doziers and the Ontario Rat series knives. Also, those are great knives, don't get me wrong. Just a pretty poor coating on them. This perhaps baked on a little bit better than on those blades. It is hollow ground, as you can see here, from right about half of the blade down. Okay, so we're at about half the grind of the blade. and it's a fairly deep hollow grind, and this did slice cardboard reasonably well when using the plain edge section, okay? And I mention that because the serrations here, while they look pretty interesting and they look like they do very well, don't cut very well on mine because this knife was, the serrations on it specifically, were dull out of box. That is kind of a miss because the plain edge portion of the blade was pretty sharp, but my serrations were completely dull. So I'm going to have to get a thin or small ceramic or diamond rod and get in there and sharpen those. I haven't done so yet. But out of box, those serrations did not perform very well for me. Might be an isolated incident. At the price point, there's bound to be some quality control issues. There's bound to be some differences between each production run. Alright, so maybe I just got unlucky in that way, but I had to point it out. My serrations were dull. My straight edge portion of the knife, however, was reasonably sharp, and whenever it did go dull, it sharpened up like a breeze, just like any 8CR13 or 8CR14 steel does. Alright. So, reasonable cutting ability. Definitely a fan of it. The blade shape works well. We do have this notch on the top of the blade, which I believe is meant to be used as a wire breaker, according to DPX Hest, which this is copying. I haven't tried using it as a bottle opener. Based on the shape of it, I don't think it's going to work that well for it. But what it does work as is a wave feature. Yep, this knife will actually wave out of pocket relatively easily. Not quite as efficiently or as effectively as an Emerson or a Spyderco wave design or a Cold Steel wave. So it does take a little more practice, but I can get this to wave deploy pretty commonly and pretty easily out of my pocket. Alright, and I might try to do so on the pocket here on the table. Honestly, it's kind of hard to work around the tripod and get these things to show off on camera. I couldn't even do it with that Kershaw Emerson very effectively, but I will try. And probably embarrass myself horribly. Yep, couldn't do it on camera from this angle. Maybe I'll record a small snip video of me using it as a wave feature. Until then, just take my word for it, that does work reasonably effectively as a wave feature on the knife. The other methods to deploy it are dual thumb studs, which we can see are a typical stepped pattern. They do provide pretty good grip, and they are reasonably comfortable to use. The knife comes out fast and locks up solid, by the way. No play up and down, no play side to side. If we ever do get any play, we have a flat head pivot screw, okay, which I love. Single-sided, by the way. Flathead pivot screw, very easy to adjust. I actually am a big fan of that. I mentioned that on the Kershaw Emerson video, but it locks up like a bank vault. We also have a flipper, and the flipper works pretty well as well. Okay, if we just pull down from the top, it can deploy, but rather slowly if we're doing a top flipper deployment. See, not always guaranteed that way. If we come down further on the flipper, nice and fast, and if we use it like a push button, also nice and fast deployment. So fast deploying, solid lockup. This is a liner lock design. You can see that it has a, I'd say a medium lockup. The liner is perhaps a bit thin, but I haven't had any failings with the knife since I've been using it. No, I haven't spine whacked with it. You can see it is fully steel lined with no skeletonizing, and as a result the knife is a bit chunky. I don't have the weight listed offhand. I have notes on my computer screen as I look up so I don't forget the specs, but I seem to have forgotten to put the weight there, so check the description of the video for the weight of the knife. But it does have a little bit of heft in hand. Okay, not a big deal, not super heavy, but you do notice it. And in carry, you know, you're not going to forget that you have it on you. Honestly though, that's not a huge issue. Handle, as I mentioned, is G10. On this particular version, it is a OD Green G10. Medium traction, about the same as your Spyderco Tenacious type knives, your Bird type knives, your Columbia River Drifters, so on and so forth. 4.5 inch long on that handle, by the way. And as far as handle thickness, it's perhaps a bit thick in the pocket, a bit chunky. Not a huge issue. Again, if you're buying a knife like this, you're probably you know, wanting something that you can actually use reliably and comfortably. And because of that somewhat thicker handle, it is a fairly comfortable knife in hand. I will say that the handle is a bit squared off. Okay, some square shoulders on there. It's not a rounded design. But in cutting with this, I did not experience any hot spots personally. We do have some jimping top spine of the knife, and it is absolutely worthless. It's very, very rounded, and the Teflon coating kind of further polishes that, so it's just for looks. But we do have a ramp as well as that flipper coming out to act as a guard, so there's no way we're going to go forward on this knife when using it. As I mentioned before, the handle has kind of an extrema ratio style design. Hope I'm saying that name right, by the way. And I think that's kind of interesting because unlike many knives out there, this doesn't seem to be copying any one specific knife. I couldn't find any knife from Extrema Ratio or DPX Hest that looks exactly like this. Okay, so it seems to be borrowing one feature from Hest, one feature from Ratio, and the rest is their own design. Kudos to them for that. At least it's somewhat original. By the way, that liner, I will mention when disengaging the liner lock, it is perhaps just a bit sharp. Okay, it does dig into your finger a little bit, but not too bad, and at least it is jimped to provide a good grip on the liner itself. Perhaps a little sharp on the jimping, though, in combination with how thin the liner is, might make it somewhat uncomfortable to disengage. We do have a mostly flow-through design, so it is easy to clean out. Down here, you notice we have a small backspacer, and that is for our glass breaker. Okay, you see that? This is the reason I say it would make a decent rescue knife, a knife to leave in the car, because if you need to go to the glove box or the console to access the knife after an accident, you can use that glass breaker to break the window, and of course you can use the blade to cut the seatbelt. Hopefully your serrations are sharper than mine at a box, but the plain edge section should do it just fine. You do have a good enough span of cutting edge there to do so. Centering on the knife, I don't know if I mentioned that yet. If I can get it to show up, is perfect. Absolutely dead center on the centering. Okay, I love that. And the pocket clip is a tip up carry, right hand or left hand. You can back those screws out and the clip can actually go to either side. So this is a fully ambidextrous knife. I know some people say that liner locks inherently are not ambidextrous. I grew up with a left-handed brother. My older brother is a left-hander, and whenever I was asking him about this, because he's carried a knife pretty much his whole life just like I have, our father basically believed that we should always have a knife on us, I asked him if liner locks and frame locks were uncomfortable to him, and he mentioned while he does prefer lockback designs, he doesn't notice any difficulty disengaging a liner lock with his left hand, because as a left-hander, his whole life when using them, he's known nothing else but to pull back on the liner lock with his thumb. Just as right-handers are automatically trained to disengage the lock by pushing it, left-handers are trained to disengage the lock by pulling it toward them. So I wouldn't say that being a liner lock makes it inherently non-ambidextrous. Okay, at least from my brother's opinion. And I'll trust that because it does make sense. If you've only known one thing your whole life, then why should it be an issue? So yeah, I'd say it's fully ambidextrous, especially with those thumb studs, the flipper, and the wave feature, or the notch that you can use as a wave feature, as well as the reversible pocket clip. I would say this is a lefty-friendly knife, for sure. By the way, if you did want to use this as a self-defense knife, you could use that glass breaker as a reasonable skull breaker. Basically an impact weapon on the butt of your knife. I will say when holding the knife in this position, in this kind of reverse hammer grip, the section above the notch does bite into your hand a little bit. Okay, so maybe you're better off holding it this way if you wanted to use it as an impact weapon. More than likely though, you'll never have to do that. If you're ever holding it in this position, you're probably breaking a window, which is also very unlikely, unless you see some jackass who's left his dog in Walmart's parking lot with the windows rolled up, in which case, yeah, pull this out and bust that window wide open. I don't know about where you live, but here in Texas it's completely legal to do so, and we're actually encouraged to do so if we see an animal in a car. And I will do it every damn time. We have a lanyard hole here, which perhaps a bit narrow. I'm sure you could fit your 550 cord through there though, if you wanted to put a lanyard on this knife. Personally, I think the handle is large enough that I don't need to, and I have just as much exposure to that pocket clip to grab onto the knife, which by the way, here is how it rides. So, not a loop over deep carry clip, but I love the way it carries because it is just enough for me to grab the knife and extract it. And by the way, that clip does have reasonable tension, perhaps a bit more of a lip on it than I'd like to see. But that is just personal preference. Overall, I'm actually pretty impressed with this little Hurricane G10 folding knife, especially from a brand that I didn't even know existed. And by the way, I'm pretty sure this is the only knife they make. I would love to see this knife have an actual model name. Maybe they could call it the Hurricane Twister, the Hurricane Tsunami, you know, name their knives after natural disasters or something because the brand name is Hurricane. That could be cool. Or maybe the brand can, you know, rebrand itself and just call this the Hurricane model and make other knives like the Tornado, the Twister, the Tsunami, the Flood, so on and so forth. I think that would be cool, but it's just a, you know, minor idea, honestly fairly unrelated to the knife itself. I don't really have a lot else to say about the knife. It's a pretty decent bargain, again, for about 15 bucks or less on Amazon. You can't really go wrong with it. Now, I stole the Cutler Lever Pocket idea for the video and for various others. Now I'm going to steal Nut and Fancy's competitive options section because I feel like it's a good idea, and I've always tried to incorporate it into my videos ever since I've seen him doing it. How about the Enlin EL02? HCR 13 MOV blade on this one, G10 handles. This one has the polished G10. They do make the EL02B with a textured G10. Axis type lock, somewhat sharp on that axis lock. You'll see that in this knife's own review. But you know, axis type lock, right hand tip up only clip. Price point about 16 bucks. Reasonably ergonomic. Okay, it's in the same ballpark. Similar size, similar price, similar materials. It's definitely worth considering. Here's that F and Growl that I reviewed, the EF55, and honestly, I had a lot of issues with the knife, but it's still a pretty decent knife for the money. Okay, HCR 13 MOV blade, don't believe that tang stamp, it's a lie. HCR 13 MOV blade, G10 handles, also a liner lock, also right hand tip up carry only, price point about $26. So, more expensive than the Hurricane. Here's the Schrade 503 Shore Lock. Awesome knife. I reviewed this one recently as well. AUS 8 steel blade, a shore lock mechanism. So, kind of like an axis lock and a lockback had a baby. I guess it's more like a roller lock and a lockback had a baby. But super ergonomic in hand. Right hand tip up carry clip only. Seen a lot of that. Not a lot of ambidextrous knives at this price point. Solid lockup, nice blade shape. Price on closeout right now about $15 or so as well. Alright, here's another ambidextrous knife. How about the Gonzo by Firebird, or Firebird by Gonzo I should say. G738. 440C steel on this one, G10 handle. The G-lock, which is basically an axis lock. Right hand tip up carry. Oh, there we go. Right hand or left hand tip up carry. Pretty decent centering. Price point about $17. Alright, so you can see there are a lot of knives in, that will compete with the Hurricane at its price point. However, if you're looking at this particular knife and wondering if it's worth adding to your collection for the money, based on the one I have here in hand, again, lower cost knives, cheaper knives, may have some quality control issues and differences between batches, but using this one as a reference, I would say it's absolutely worth the money. So, that has been my review of the Hurricane G10 Foley knife. I hope it was helpful to you guys. I hope you enjoyed the video, and I hope you enjoy the rest of your day. Until next time, peace, and take care.